January 2026 demo day, first one of the year. So thanks everyone for joining. I think we're going to get things started today with Alex. He's going to show some of what he's been working on recently on the web. And then I will show a couple web items as well as some .NET client changes. So Alex, you want to take it away?
Yeah, and so just a heads up, this is still in active development. We're getting close to the end, but if we see anything funny, it, it may still be possible. So to start, this is in support of a workflow that one integration wants to do that allows them to approve uh, credits that are being paid out that are over a certain age. And so we've got some extra validation business logic that we want to be applied. And so to do this, we chose a much more flexible path that should allow a lot of integrations to apply a whole lot of different features that they might want to do. So to start, we can see that the table here, the list of invoices, looks a little different. We now support using a lookup here as defined on the MRK control, which I didn't bring up. So you'll still see the table that you already see if you don't make any changes. But if you do want to take control over what's being displayed in that table, you now have that option. Um, and it's right here in MRK Control, the invoices lookup that you can select. This is still fully featured. It's got the same click events. You've got your options to download, email, and print. Those are still there. And so now if we want to continue to payment, what happens is we now actually do a validation request, kind of like we do elsewhere when creating an order to add parts to it and everything. And part of what the validate routines can do now on the host side is provide extra actions that we want to perform. So in this case, this is bringing up a forms def form. So this is a dynamic form that was created on the host side based on the approval file. This is just kind of a new testing file that we're using for demonstration. So you can see we've got all the same fields here displayed as are here. And the validate routine can also provide default values. So the validate routine is actually providing us with today's date and my current logged in user so that users don't have to enter that if they don't want to, kind of a thing. And also we've got a drop down here for a handful of reasons. And those are the reasons specified on this approval file for that field. So I can scroll down to it. And so you can see you've got reason 1, 2, 3. So this is all coming from the FDIC. So this is fully customizable on the back end with very little work or almost no work that we need to do on the front end. So if you want to hook into this for any reason, you can certainly do so. So we can click save here. And so the point here is they're not allowed to proceed on with this until they have approval. So we will now hop over to the accounting side, which now supports another list of lookups that you can provide, and you'll get a new card here for each of the lookups that you provide. And so that is in account control over here. And so this actually has 3 different things that you can select here. So the first is the additional lookup, and that specifies kind of what the name is going to be displayed here on your KPI cards here with intended future functionality that we will be able to support, bringing in some of that data from that lookup to display here on the card, kind of like you see on these other ones where you've got some summary data. Then additionally, you've got a view lookup. And so now if I were to click on this card, this is the lookup that is defined on this second column. So you can also pick whichever data table you want to see when you've gotten here. And the third option is view action. And so this is a list of forms that you that are all tied to the accounting module. So if I were to click on one of these, say I click on the one from today, I now have an approval submission form. So this is also defaulted with the date and username. However, that is through a different feature. On forms def, we now support 2 default values right now that are dynamic. So at % SD will fill in today's date and user will fill in the current logged in user. So this is the filling in happens on the website, but this can be specified now in forms def. We also now on these forms def forms support a data table. So this shows the line items that were added to that invoice to be approved and the amounts tied to it. And so again, I can enter notes or whatever here, but basically this will submit an approval and remove it from this data table. So again, this is all fully customizable. We can add, remove columns on the fly, all from the host side. You can change the forms if you want. And if there's any other business processes that you'd like, that can pretty much all be driven host side. There's some additional options that can be handled from the validation events. We can just display a dialog box if you don't want to have a form. You can even now route to another arbitrary address. So if you want to point someone to a different part of point of sale or something like that, you can also do that here through the validate responses. So should be a lot of flexibility and a lot of possible value add for other integrations and a lot of control here that doesn't rely on web releases to continue rolling out new features or changes to the web.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Alex. Anyone have questions on any of this? Again, this is still actively in development, not released yet, and this is kind of just a high-level summary of the kinds of things we can do. As Alex said, this brings a lot of different flexibility, so we could plug in all sorts of different functionality with this. Susie.
Good morning. I'm sorry, I think I might have missed the very first explanation. This is for approving changes to an existing order? Like accounting is approving, like, oh, the customer called and wanted to add another line item to their order and maybe they're over their credit limit, or is that what I'm thinking, or is this a different approval?
In this case, this is actually intended for a non-Rover integration, but this particular customer wants to enforce approvals on credits that are over a certain age. So the idea here is if they wanted to select a credit and pay it out, or use a credit as part of a transaction with other positive invoices, if they included any credit that was over a certain age, then it would prompt for this approval. So when Alex clicked continue to payment, there is a credit on here that's quote unquote old or aged, and that's what caused that approval prompt to come up. If the business logic on the host side didn't say that that one needed approval, then it would continue through to the normal payment process as normal. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, so you wouldn't necessarily do this in Rover. There's not currently sort of a host side mechanism for this, but these are the kinds of things that we could hook in anywhere. So if you wanted to introduce this kind of logic, as you said, maybe if someone's changing a sales order, trying to add a line to it, you could have the host enforce that kind of logic. Maybe only certain people can do that without approval. So just opens a lot of options going forward.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? Okay, well, I will jump over to another feature that's in development and should be going in production shortly. So in the ticketing module, so this is kind of mostly internal purposes at the moment. I think you all are probably familiar with the fact that if you were to apply any filters or sorts here and then open an item, potentially make changes and then return to the tickets list, it would previously reselect the tickets and would not keep your sorts or filters. So now if we go in here and apply a filter, so if we want, well, apparently I don't have any Zoom Assist items for me. Let's see, clear this. All right, so now I've got it filtered to only Zoom Assist demo customers, and I'll open one of these, and then I'll return back to tickets, and it didn't remove my customer filter. It also maintains the sort. So if you want it sorted and you open an item and return to it, it won't change your sort. Additionally, if you made a change to one of these, so we'll open this item 9, you can see it was open. If I close this ticket and save it, and then return back to the ticket screen, it does reflect those changes. So it reselected but kept the sort and filter, and now this ticket 9 is properly reflecting that it's closed rather than open. So that should be coming shortly, just kind of a quality of life improvement, so you don't have to reapply your sorts and filters when you're hopping back and forth between tickets in the main search list. Any questions there? Okay, now I want to demo a couple upcoming changes in the .NET client. So there's been a lot of consternation around how the Z index of Windows works within the application. In the .NET client, it currently differs from how it used to work in the legacy client. In the legacy client, when you had multiple windows open and then you went to a different application and then returned, all of the Rover windows were brought to the foreground. They were all at the same Z level, and any non-Rover windows would not be interspersed. So kind of this behavior that you're seeing right here. So some people don't like that behavior and prefer the way the legacy client worked. So we're adding a new feature in settings for legacy client Z index behavior, open to ideas of what we should call that, but that's what it is for now. So now when you have multiple Rover windows open and you go to a non-Rover window and then you click back into Rover, it brings all the Rover windows back to the same Z index, kind of like the legacy client did. So you'll notice as I pop back and forth, now this notepad window is not interspersed in the Rover windows. There's a couple other things that are happening here too. There was a bug where when you would bring up a lookup or potentially open a dialog, if you were doing a select list, so a lookup that presents a selection grid, or if you did a lookup which just prompted for a value, if you had one of those active and you clicked outside of our application and then tried to return, unless you clicked on the window that had that dialog active, you couldn't get back into it. So that's been addressed now, and that works outside of this Z index change. So even if you don't enable legacy mode, we can do that real quick. So we'll turn this setting, by the way, can be toggled on the fly. So if you decide you want it one way for part of the day and the other way the rest of the day, you can do that. So now we're back into the non-legacy mode, so we can have windows interspersed. Another use case there, by the way, is let's say you had Excel or something and you had some data in it that you want to be able to reference while you're in one of our windows. That's kind of a reason to not have legacy enabled. So you could have CustQ open and you could have some other document here that you're referencing. But what I was trying to show here is if you had an active lookup and you clicked out and then you tried to get back into the application, not clicking on the dialog itself, that didn't work before, but now you can get back in there. The other thing is there were some edge cases where if you opened a lookup, it would sometimes minimize the window behind it. So you would still see your lookup, but you would lose focus on the window that launched that thing to begin with. So that should all be cleaned up now in this next release as well. Any questions about this before I go into a different set of changes?
Can I add something real quick?
Sure.
So the kind of long-standing bug or issue where we'd kind of get like Outlook or Excel kind of in between the Rover windows kind of sporadically, we're pretty confident that's fixed even with the legacy mode off. So in the quote unquote modern mode, it's all that bug that Greg was just talking about with pop-ups, like the selection grids or the little dialog pop-ups. Fixing that seems to have fixed that weird behavior we've been seeing where, you might get Outlook in the middle or Excel in the middle, or, you just lose a few entry screens to the back of your Z index. That one bug seems to be the source of all of those issues. So the legacy mode is kind of like a bonus, but the actual root issue seems to be fixed. Now, granted, Greg and I are still testing that.
Yeah, there may be some weird edge cases here where if you left our application and you had windows in a certain order and then you returned, they may not be quite in the same order. We're testing some of those weird edge cases. But so far, this seems pretty solid. And as Andrew mentioned, the thing that was really annoying was when you would do a lookup and then you would lose some of your windows and all of a sudden you'd have Outlook or something else in the middle. So hopefully that should behave a lot better now. Okay. Unless there's any other questions, I'll go into another set of updates here. So we're making some adjustments. Go ahead.
When is that version release available? Can I get it now?
So I have a pre-release. If you're willing to be a beta tester, I can pass it along to you. I wouldn't suggest giving this to any customers just yet. We'd like to test it out internally a little further. But I can pass along the link.
I'll use it, yes,
Okay,
if
I
I
will
can get
send
the
you the link right after the meeting.
All right, thanks.
Yep. Okay, so a couple changes that we've made to the installer. So we now support full command line installation options. So I'm going to do a quiet uninstall of the application. So this is sort of a minimal UI, and some of this is just Microsoft installer functionality, but we have added specific command line options that allow someone who's installing this across a group of machines to apply all of the settings without ever needing to interact with the installer UI. So I just uninstalled it with a bare minimum of installation. And then I'm going to run another command line here that will install the application. Whoops, if I can copy. So this QB flag is what shows just a minimal amount of feedback. So it doesn't show you any of the normal prompts that you would be asked to answer during the installation. But we can also run it in a QN mode. I'll uninstall it one more time. And we'll run it completely quiet. So this would be good if you were administrator that's wanting to script this install across all of your machines in the organization and you don't want any feedback. So if you run it in QN, it doesn't give any feedback, but you'll notice here in a moment that my Rover icon should pop up here. Yep. So the installation is complete and it did work. So I'm jumping around here a little bit. Let me go in and I'll show a couple other options here, and then I'll run the installer interactively and show what it looks like if a user were to run it interactively. So one thing that we've done here is we've added the ability to have a minimal number of fields that show up. And this was always an option. You could manually, when you were installing, choose if you wanted to hide certain fields. But we found from a support perspective that sometimes caused issues because on the support side, we need to know what those values are. And if they're hidden, you have to go digging into a configuration file. So we've now moved those hidden fields into an additional settings option. And by default, they would still be editable, but we also have the option to make those read-only. So if I launch this again, and this time we'll choose a config that has those set to, oops, I think I did that backwards. So they're editable. Here they should not be. I've got a little bug that I'm trying to work around here where it's sometimes showing the thing there. So they're read-only. So via command line, an administrator can set all of these options. They can choose whether all of the fields are shown like a normal login like we would use internally. They can also indicate whether they want multiple configuration files available and whether they want additional settings to be editable or read-only. So that can all be done command line. Let's uninstall this one more time. And then I'll show you what the normal installation, if you're running it interactively, looks like. And I didn't go to the right spot. Sorry about that. Okay, so if we just ran it interactively like normal, there's a few changes here as well. So this is what you would always see, prompting for the install location. So this is a new screen where we give you the option to have it override existing configuration. So if the application were already installed and you wanted to change the configuration through a GUI installation, you can check that box. We also now give you the ability to enable the show multiple configurations. Previously, that had to be done within the settings window in the application. So you couldn't do it without logging in first. So now that's an option during install, both command line and interactive. So if we proceed, this was the same setting that we always had. We're going to change some defaults here to make this SSH instead of Telnet, and we need to adjust the port. So that's the standard connection type and port that we normally use. But now you get these three options. So previously, this was a list of 4 fields that you could choose to hide. Now you have the option to show all prompts, username and password only with advanced settings editable. So that's that view where when you expanded the section, the values were there, but you could change them, or user password only with advanced settings read only. So in that case, the advanced settings are hidden, but if you click on them, you can see them, but they're read only. You can't make any adjustments. So just a couple changes to the installation routine. Mainly, if you were reinstalling the application, you could just click through and choose all the defaults. It's still that same behavior. So if you don't change anything, it will all work in the way it previously did, with the exception of if you want multiple configurations, you do have to check that on the screen. So again, just some slight adjustments to the UI and also adding all of the command line options so that it could be installed programmatically across the interface or across the organization. I know I rambled on a little bit there. Any questions about this? Okay. Well, I think that's all that we wanted to show today. Unless anyone has more general questions, we'll call that a wrap. All right. Thank you, everyone.